I think we've all had it happen once or twice where the players walk into, let's say, maybe a marketplace and go around asking different merchants for different things and different prices on different items. This can be a struggle in immersion if every single one of the shopkeepers is the same person. So we're going to solve this issue with a simple formula that I've put together for myself, but I wanted to share with you. So first we're going to touch on the 3 or 4 most important things when it comes to building an NPC. The most important is their weakness, something that they actively struggle with, and really maybe the main thing that shines when they're talking to the players. After that is something that they need. This one's sort of difficult to understand because it's different from the next step, which is desire. A need is something that a person has to achieve in order to be better, but something that they might not be aware of, or something that they don't really want to change about themselves just now. I'll elaborate on that when I make a few examples in the coming minutes. A desire is something that a person really wants but doesn't necessarily need. Desires vary widely, but they're as apparent in most people as weaknesses are. And the fourth thing, which not everyone needs, but I think it's good to have to some extent in certain characters, sort of as a motivational tool, is an enemy. This enemy can be dead or alive, an idea, or even an organization. It's just something that draws this person's distaste. So I'll be throwing out a few characters alongside you, sort of shooting out different aspects of these persons, just as examples. So first thing we need is a name. We can change this later if something about the character sticks out and has a more fitting name that we can apply to them. But for now, I'm going to call him Brent. Brent is a very simple merchant, so we're going to give him simple weaknesses and desires. His weakness, let's say, is that maybe he's not as social as everyone would like him to be. Maybe he's a little blunt and a bit cold when people ask him for things that he's not keen on giving. Now that we've covered the basics of his weaknesses, we can move on to his need. Most times this need is derived from the weakness, so let's say that he needs friends and family. Maybe he doesn't have anyone close to him right now, and that's what's helped him sort of cultivate this cold personality. Now, aiming for his desire, most of the time they're not going to be the same thing as the need. Let's say Brent's desire is simply put gold. Now, because he desires gold and maybe weighs it very highly, he might hike up the prices of his items just to get a couple more coins coming his way. This can cause a bit more of an interesting interaction between him and the party as opposed to them just buying the item and walking away. I think weaknesses and desires definitely stand out the most in terms of immersion. Now, for his enemy, let's put Brent in an actual town. And his enemy is going to be a more successful shopkeeper, maybe someone who has a bigger stock that Brent can't yet afford. Now that we've covered the basics of this character, for merchants, let's give them a few extra bullet points. Let's start with rumors. These rumors can be related to the character's current main quest line, sort of something that the whole world is concerned about. It could be local too. So let's say that his local rumor is there's a bunch of bandits running around outside of town, and maybe it's just a warning. Next up is a secret. For simple merchants, I think it's best for their secret to be irrelevant to the NPCs, sort of help with world building. So let's make it a secret that he knows about his rival. Maybe one thing that he really wants to pin him down for, but can't really figure out how to. Maybe his enemy is doing some fencing work and he doesn't want to speak up because if he does, he might lose his throat. Now, the third thing for merchants, again, it's not super important, but if you want to throw this in, I think it'll help with world building. And this is their favorite part of the job. Let's say Brent really likes to keep his shop as tidy as possible. So it's something that you can point out when they walk into the shop, is how beautiful and clean it is and how well kept everything is. And maybe if one of the party members knocks over a fancy vase or tracks mud in, he's not going to be happy. So there you have it, your first merchant. Now let's move on to a local villain. This shouldn't be someone that's overarching. This could be a random encounter that you have a little bit of personality set aside for. So I'm going to go ahead and name this local villain Johnny Five Strings. Let's say that his name is derived from a history of being a bard, just because that's the first thing that I came up with. I think it's good to always hold on to your first concepts for simple characters because they're not that important, so you don't need to put too much thought into them. For his weakness, I think it would be interesting if he were a bit of a coward. He's a bit scrawny and not really good at fighting. Now we're going to jump on to one of the specific aspects of a local villain is their criminal specialty. I think it would make sense for someone as weak and terrified as Johnny is to be a fence, someone who doesn't really get involved in combat very much. So maybe he found himself in a scuttle that the party members started. Now for his need, I think because he doesn't like this job very much, he probably wants to go back to being a bard, so let's say that his need is to leave this job. Maybe it's something that he can't actively seek out because he's got contracts to fulfill. Now we're going to move on to his desire. Let's say, as a past bard, he's very interested in telling stories, so maybe his desire is to smuggle some amazing artifact, and that will set him on the course to a happier life because he has money from it. Now it's easy for local villains to have an enemy. We're just going to throw the town guards in there. And to make a villain a bit more interesting and more human, I think everyone should have a good side. Maybe Johnny has a family that he's keeping secret from everyone he's tied to. Maybe he does all this just to support the people that he loves. Now let's move a little bit further down the hierarchy to kings and lords. The party might not be directly involved in every one of these characters, but it's good to have the town's motives sort of built around the person that rules it. So I'm going to make my ruler a baron. Let's say a baroness. Her name will be Baroness von Bradbury. Now let's jump straight into her weakness. I think it's important that not everyone should be standoffish because then your players will feel like you hate them directly and you're really bad at building characters that are endearing. So her weakness, as a ruler, is that she's a bit too kind. Maybe she doesn't pull in everybody's taxes, and as a result, the town's defenses suffer. Now her need, again, is derived from her weakness. She definitely needs to be stronger and more iron-fisted when it comes to certain aspects of her rule. Now let's move on to her desire. Let's say that her desire could also be derived from her weakness. Because she doesn't collect taxes, she's lacking in town guards, and as a result, let's say a local gnoll camp is giving everyone trouble that she can't really take care of. So her desire is for those gnolls to go away. Not everything about these characters has to be really specific, so I think that her enemy could simply be those gnolls. Now for kings, lords, and baronesses, I think there are some interesting aspects of these characters that can really help build the town. Firstly, let's ask the question, are they happy? Do they really enjoy ruling over other people? Or has it become so difficult that there are constant coups against this character? I would say for the Baroness, she would be happy, to some degree. For someone who's in charge of hundreds of people, they should also have an additional desire that's directly related to what they rule over. I would think that Baroness von Bradbury is a woman who appreciates beautiful things. I'm going to say that she wants to add a garden to the city. The Baroness is maybe saving up a bit of money for this, but it's something that she can't quite achieve just yet. And for every king and lord, they have to have a local problem. Maybe it's a crime syndicate, but for the Baroness, I'm going to make her rule very simple, and it is again going to be that party of gnolls. Something else that you could consider when adding in random encounters or just NPCs that are walking through the streets is another hero, a different adventurer that isn't directly related to the party, but has similar motives. I'm going to make this character a little bit interesting and just throw out the name Dennis the Vigilant. Dennis is someone with very high aspirations, but doesn't have the means to achieve them. So let's say that his weakness is that he has difficulty collecting other people that might help him with his tasks. I think Dennis wants to be everywhere at once, but doesn't want people to help him. So his need, of course, would be to expand his horizons, maybe collect a party for the things that he's dealing with right now, at least. Again, with his desire, he wants to be everywhere at the same time, solving all the world's problems by himself. He wants to be recorded in history as the hero who did everything. It's definitely okay to be cliché with these characters because they really shouldn't be that important to you, so I'm going to make Dennis's enemy a distant lich in a tower. Something you need to keep in mind for random heroes is their opinion of other travelers and heroes. Do they like other people, or do they not really associate with other party members? Maybe they have a clique that they stick to, and they might fight other people who step on their turf. It's sort of a given that Dennis does not like other heroes. He might not take too lightly to the party, but he does have valuable information. And with heroes, and most adventurers, I think they've already done at least one thing worthy of note. Let's say that Dennis has helped the local city by stopping a zombie invasion. And thirdly, for heroes, they need unique magic items. I think each one of them should have something along the line of an uncommon tier item. This is something that's really helped them achieve the fame that they have now. Dennis definitely needs mobility to be who he is, so let's give him the Broom of Flying. Now let's throw together a commoner really quick, just someone who doesn't matter very much at all in the world, but still serves a very important function. Instead of stepping straight into their weakness, I'm going to ask you how they get by. For my commoner, Thomas, I'm going to say that he gets by as a farmer. Maybe he farms corn or carrots. We'll give him a very down-to-earth weakness, is that he doesn't really respect adventurers because he thinks that all their heads are in the clouds. So in a sense, he's very closed-minded. Now moving on to his need, let's relate it to his crops, but also build off of his weakness. Maybe whatever he's planting, people don't want, and he thinks that it's everyone else's fault that he can't really shift into a new field. For his desire, let's make it a little bit cliche again and say that he is in love with the local king's daughter. It's something that he can't achieve, but he still struggles with accepting. And for commoners, it's a good question to ask where they'd rather be. I don't think anyone doing very down-to-earth jobs is entirely content doing that. So let's say, as we've already established, that Thomas wants to be in the castle with his beloved. Where they'd rather be is different than their desire, because their desire is something that they think they can achieve locally. Where they'd rather be, however, is somewhere that they simply dream about every night. It's pretty easy to make Thomas's enemy now that we've established who he is and what kind of person wouldn't take kindly to him. We can give him two enemies because he's not a very likable guy. Let's say the king is not fond of Thomas one bit, and that's sort of a two-way relationship, but let's say that Thomas has made his own enemy with a local farmer who's actually adapting his crop. The last thing I'm going to cover in this video is a scholar, someone who studies in a wizard's tower but isn't really related to the wizard's actual focus. You can relate scholars and cultists very closely, and I think design them to some extent the same way. So I'm going to name my scholar Sarah, and her weakness is that she delves a bit too deeply into books and doesn't really socialize with many people. Some of my examples aren't exactly the most interactive characters, but when I'm making characters, I feel the need to make them a little bit more human than just a pawn in a game. For Sarah, I'm actually going to make her need not related to her weakness, and say that she needs to do some field work as opposed to poring over existing pages and gather new information. Now, her desire sort of falls in line with her need, but is also an aspect of her weakness. Let's say that she wants to make one incredible discovery in the field that she's passionate about, which is actually the next thing I want to cover about scholars, is what they're passionate about. For Sarah, as a wizard's apprentice, we're going to give her passion for a school of magic. I'm going to pick my favorite school and say that she is very interested in conjuration. Now, the final aspect of Sarah is something that she's learned during all of her research. Something that she knows that the party doesn't, whether it's relevant to their current task at hand or not. I'm going to say for Sarah, as a conjurer, she's learned a new spell. Maybe she has the ability to teleport small objects from one place to another without expending spell slots. Not necessarily that she'd share this with the party, but it is still something that might pique a player's interest. At the very least, if you didn't learn anything from this video, I hope that you can use the characters that I've made in your campaign. But if you threw down some notes and you can maybe make a table for these characters, it'd be really easy to just roll up a few things and make your game more interesting for everyone playing. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.